I've been making comics for about 10 years. I have a degree in comics, yes that is a thing, and I've been making videos about comic creation for about 3 years. And in that time I've made a lot of mistakes when it comes to comic creation, which has resulted in stalled or cancelled projects, a lot of frustration, and it can all be entirely avoidable. And to show you how to avoid it, I'm going to break down 3 key areas that you need to address so that you can create your comic smoothly without burning out. Part 1. Be prepared for the trail. Imagine that you wanted to hike through the fictional Appalachia Trail in Fallout 76, but you only bring with you a BB gun and a Vault suit. It won't be until after you started your trail and you run into your first Rad Scorpion that you realize you should have brought better gear, better weapons, and a ton of Radaway. And now you may be completely demotivated to complete your journey because you weren't expecting it to be quite this difficult. A lot of comic creators go through this exact same thing, Rad Scorpions included. You expect it to be kind of easy, and it's not until you're in the thick of it that you realize that it's harder than you could have imagined. And this is often where comics get stalled or cancelled. So before you start your next comic, there are a couple of questions that you should ask yourself. Do you want to get published by a publisher? Do you want to grow a following online? Do you want to learn new skills? Do you want to tell one story or multiple? Or do you want to do this entirely for fun? Chances are there's a bit of a mixture in there for you where you want to create a comic that's good enough for people to enjoy, but you want to learn new skills and have fun along the way. That's a decent mindset to be in before you start. Because if you've never made a comic before, you're going to be surprised by just how long it takes you. If you think you'll be done within 3 to 6 months, then take those numbers and double them, because that's much more closer to reality. We're just not very good at understanding how long it really takes to make a comic, and it can take longer than we expect it to for a whole host of different reasons. That's why it's important to understand why you want to make a comic in the first place, because it's a big commitment. Think about it like a long-term relationship. There's going to be highs and lows, and you've got to figure out whether for you that effort is worth it. Hopefully the answer is yes, because comics are great. And sticking to the relationship analogy, a lot of people, when they start making comics, they want to get married straight away. They want to make a 50 or 100 or 200 page comic immediately, which is as insane as wanting to marry someone before you've even been on a date with them. How do you know that you share the same interests? How do you know that you'll feel the same about the person after a week, let alone after several years? Which, by the way, if you're going to create a 50, 100, 200 page comic, you're going to be with that comic for several years. So instead, go on a few dates first. Make a couple of 4, 6, or 8 page comics and see if it vibes with you. This will do several things. 1, it will determine whether you actually enjoy making comics in the first place. Next, it will show you what you need to work on the most by exposing your weaknesses. And it will allow you to test out different kind of stories to see which kind of stories you like to tell. This is one of the reasons why I made a free trial and option on my Patreon for this tier. You can join it, see if it vibes with you, and if it doesn't, just cancel. Easy. Cheap plugs to one side, it's important for us to understand our why because it's our why that gets us through the tough times. The times where we're feeling doubt or anxiety, and it's worth considering writing down your why and putting it somewhere close to where you make your comic. You never know when you might need reminding. Part 2, fuck the fundamentals. The title of this part is a little strong, I must admit, but I also kind of mean it. When I first started seriously studying the fundamentals, particularly anatomy and perspective, it's all I could think about. I became too focused on what was correct, and it started to impact my creativity negatively. And it got to a point where I would freeze whenever I started a new page of my comic, because I'd be worried that I'd got the landmarks of the body wrong or the perspective was slightly wonky. That is until I started to see what the fundamentals really are to creators. The fundamentals are correction tools, not creation tools. That means that for you, the first thing you should do when it comes to your comic is just draw. Don't be too concerned with what's correct, and instead be more concerned with what you feel is the most interesting way to translate your script to the combination of words and pictures, aka comics. Then once you've filled your page with your ideas and you've locked those ideas in place, then you can bring the fundamentals in to make the corrections that you feel are necessary. It doesn't matter, even after this point, that you get things 100% correct. So don't put that amount of pressure on yourself to make sure everything is in place and everything is correct. Use the knowledge and skills that you have today, not the knowledge and skills you wish you had, to do the best you can and then move on to the next page. Knowledge and skills are acquired over a long period of time, so you have to be patient with yourself. The good news is that you can get really good really quickly by creating this way. Because the more you create, the more you'll be able to identify where your weak points are, which means you'll be able to acquire the relevant knowledge and skills to get better at those things. We're all looking for the quickest answers to get better at comics the fastest, but the truth is the fastest and best way to get better at comics is to make comics. So create a crap ton of comics, focus on one area of weakness at a time, and you will get better. It's certainly a lot better to do things that way than spending hours and hours watching YouTube videos. Except this one, of course. So creativity comes first, the fundamentals come second. Part 3, keep going. Because comics take such a long time to make, you're going to go through a lot of different emotions while you're making it. There are times where you're going to feel unstoppable and high as a kite, and there's other times where you're going to feel really low and you're going to start questioning everything. Understand this is going to happen early on and you can prepare for it. There's a Middle Eastern saying, at least I think it's a Middle Eastern saying, which is actually quite applicable to comic creators, which is, "This too shall pass." This can help us not feel complacent when things are going really well, and it can also help pick us up when we're feeling really low, because both of these states are temporary. I know quotes can be overused and I don't want to come across as a bro in this video, but I have a quote on my magic whiteboard, which you can see there, and it helps me when the doubt starts to creep in, and I change the quote every week just to keep things fresh. But if you don't like quotes or you kind of think it's a bit of BS, which is fair, then just stick to the phrase, "This too shall pass." Other than just looking at quotes, there are a few more things that we can do to help us feel confident and positive when we're creating our comics. The first thing is to manage our expectation, and the second thing is to manage the expectation of others. The expectations of the self need to be managed by understanding that you're not as good as you want to be and you're not as good as you can be, and that's okay. Instead of feeling frustrated or saddened by that fact, use it as a source of excitement. Just think about how much better your comic's going to be next year compared to this year. And if you think like that, then your art journey becomes something to look forward to rather than something to be feared. This is easier said than done, and it does take a bit of practice. Journaling can help, meditation can help, and surrounding yourself with other creators can also help. As far as expectations of others go, this one is something that impacts us quite a lot. If your comics are not being seen by others, or people don't really seem to care about your comics, that can feel really demotivating. And it's hard not to think that the reason people don't seem to care about your comics is because the comic sucks, and you suck. But that's almost certainly not true, because there's a million reasons why people won't look at your comic. People are busy, there are loads of comics out there. They might not enjoy the particular story, genre, or theme that you've chosen, or you may not have posted enough of relevant things to feed an algorithm to serve to potential comic readers. And this is where we go back to our why question at the start. If your primary reason for creating a comic is to get published or to get reactions from others online, then you're setting yourself up for disappointment. The reason being is that you can't control what other people do. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't have ambition, but I am saying don't tie your feelings of success and failure based on what other people do, because there's nothing you can do about it. For my comic, Flowers and Shadows, I hope it's a success. I hope people really enjoy it. It would be great if it got a big enough following to justify a Kickstarter campaign, and then I can go to a few more conventions and sell it face to face, because that's an amazing feeling. But if those things don't happen, I won't consider it a failure, because they're not the primary reasons why I'm creating my comic. I'm making it because it's a story that I find interesting and they're characters that I care about. I'm making it because I want to be better at creating comics this year than I was last year. And the only way to get better at making comics next year is to make comics this year. Those other external things are like cherries on the cake. They're lovely to have and I daydream about them a lot because it's kind of fun, but they're not prerequisites for my feelings of failure or success or happiness or satisfaction with my work. If your comic isn't going as well as you thought it would, whether that's while you're making it or based on the reactions of others, then just keep going. My next video is going to be more marketing focused, which should help address some of the issues that you're having regarding the lack of reactions from others. So subscribe. You're going to get better at this. And better doesn't just mean that your skills will improve or that your abilities to incorporate the fundamentals will get better. It also means that you'll be faster at making comics, and more importantly, you'll feel more confident while you're making them. And pay attention to the emotions that you feel while you're making your comic, because they show you what you need to prioritize in order to grow. There's too much to learn all at once and it can be quite overwhelming, so you do need a little bit of structure, and your own emotions and how you relate to your progress and to your comic can act as a really good compass to figure out what you need to learn next. So if you take note of the thing that you find the most frustrating while you're making your comic, then you can learn that one thing alongside your comic. Then repeat this for the next comic, and slowly but surely over time, you'll feel less frustrated, less overwhelmed, and much more confident. Personally, for me, I think journaling is probably the best place to do this, where you can sort of collect your thoughts and organize how you feel about your comic. And if you're not sure where to start with journaling, then watch this video next.